Welcome to Build with Rob. I am Rob Dyrdek, CEO and founder of the Dyrdek Machine, a one-of-a-kind venture creation studio. We are a company that creates companies by systematically fusing art, science, and magic through a process we call the machine method. The art is the creative vision and the constant shaping and refinement of an idea. The science is the proven methods and time-tested fundamentals of business. The magic is the intangible, universal luck that provides an unexplainable push towards success. Each guest on the show is one of my Do-Or-Dier partners and co-founders. This show is an inside look to all the companies that we've created and the lessons that we have learned along the journey. Today's episode, we have Ryan Wenger, the Wang Star, founder and CEO of WhereTo. WhereTo is an enterprise travel booking software company that was acquired by Flight Center Travel Group, one of the world's largest travel agencies. WhereTo began as this crazy white space consumer travel app and morphed into this enterprise software. Ryan is someone who had a great idea but had zero knowledge of the travel industry, software development, or anything else involved in bringing an idea like this to life. But he had the grit, the determination, and the other crucial do-or-dier qualities that drove him to succeed anyway. The story of WhereTo really underscores the importance of strategic capital. All investor money is green, but not all investor money has the same value. The right strategic capital at the right time can often make the difference in a company succeeding or failing. Ryan Wenger, welcome to Build with Rob, the Wang Star. I mean, where do you get that type of nickname?
Well, Gangstar changed my life in 11th grade.
Oh, really? And you're trying to tell me the Wang Star goes all the way back to Gangstar?
Well, it wasn't until Instagram was, that I needed a handle that was obscure relatively that I realized it was a good segue to my last name of Wenger.
Okay. Let me describe you in do-or-dier terms. I refer to you as a rebel do-or-dier who will push all envelopes to make it happen. And this is based off of the idea of watching how you built Where4 into WhereTo, from a consumer product into a enterprise business software, ultimately to an acquisition. It was an unorthodox and wild style journey, to say the least, and before us, of course, is this extraordinary hardware of victory that we have here at the Dyrdek Machine. We're talking, this is borderline Super Bowl level trophy, okay? This glimmering, beautiful gold with WhereTo on it. And of course, to support an exit, we have our liquidity vintage, right? This is 24 bottles, all signed and numbered by me, so that they last in the realm of history in all Dyrdek Machine businesses. Because, our connection with you was early on at the very early development stage of the Dyrdek Machine as a whole. But I'd love for you to give the listeners some background of not only kind of a quick overview of your history, but what led to you coming up with the concept of Where4 in the first place.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for the awesome hardware.
No, it's great.
I'm from Woodstock, New York. Obviously like a rebel stronghold for a long time. And my parents were both hippies that raised me just with like a outside the box perspective. So that made me who I am. And they were both like educators. My mom's a teacher and my dad owns a bookstore. So I just like grew up with a lot of information and knowledge and outside the box thinking, and it led to all types of problems early on. Like I was in special ed for a couple of years in elementary school because everyone was like, what's going on with this kid? And eventually it did me well, and then I did pretty well in college, went to USC, went to Hastings, went to law school, wanted to be a lawyer, as many critical minded people want. And
so you graduated Hastings with a law degree.
Yeah.
And what legal field were you planning on going into?
My plan was to get into politics.
Oh,
the
Wang Star in politics, man. It could have been another wild journey unto itself.
Hopefully, it still will.
Oh, really? That's true. It's very true.
So, honestly, I wanted to do public interest, but by the time I saw my student loans, and I just I couldn't do it. So I went into private practice. I worked at a big law firm doing corporate litigation and went on that journey for a while. And then as far as how I came up with Wherefore, it was just traveling. Traveling is one of my favorite things in the world. And I love traveling to new places, and I always had a very limited budget. So I always wanted to search by how much you had to spend. You know, like it wasn't like I want to go to Vegas or I want to go to Paris. It was like, what's the furthest place I could possibly go with $777?
Okay, but so you're trying to tell me that this is strictly you're working at the law firm and you love to travel, and this is a personal problem because it didn't exist. There was no sort of search engine that was price-based, right, that gave you options. And this was just 100%, I wish this existed and I'm going to go make this myself.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then how do you, as a lawyer, right? Because here's, as I've evolved as a business person and began to build so many businesses since we first started in 2016, you know, it's really this idea of, you know, it takes this sort of do-or-dier mentality, you know, that you know, fortitude and grit and ambition and determination and like work ethic and self-belief. But if that's aimed at a unique sort of opportunity, a white space opportunity, if you will, then there's value there. But the big chasm is the knowledge and experience. You know what I mean? Like you never built a software, you never built a company, right? Like this was literally, you learned all of this while working for the law firm, right?
Yeah. You know, I learned that building a startup is a lot like a fable that I learned in when I was young. It's a medieval fable where a starving guy approaches a village and he finds a pebble and he takes it, he knocks on someone's door and he says, I have this ingredient for rock soup. All I need is a kettle and water. And the guy was like skeptical, but he's like, okay, I'll give it to you. He does it. He tastes it. He's like, this is so good, but it just needs an onion. And then he goes, okay, we'll go to the neighbor that has onions. Let's do that. So he knocks on the neighbor's door. His neighbor brings onions. And he tastes it. He's like, how is it? It's so good, but it just needs a beef bone. Do you know anyone in the village that has a beef bone? So then it's like, oh yeah, the butcher has one. But at this point, why not? So after, like, he just makes the rounds and makes literally like this delicious soup. And the aroma gets better and better, and people start coming naturally to put their ingredients in the soup. And that's what I found building a startup is like.
Extraordinary. Let me just pause. Please, world, soak that in. We got taken to a journey of rocks, a delightfully tasting, great smelling rock soup that is setting the precedent for this man's entrepreneurial journey, which I have so much appreciation for. So go ahead. How did you put together the rock, the onions, and the bone to make that soup?
So you just need the idea, and you need the crazy self-confidence, maybe overconfidence to say that you can turn it into something. And then it's about, you know, using that one ingredient to convince other people that have their ingredients to do their part. So my boss, Darren Einstein at my firm, was an entrepreneur and a very smart, very creative guy. And I just shared the idea over lunch with him very passionately. And he was like, I'm into it. Let's do this. I'll bring the money. So we built it.
Did you have the name at that point? Like, when did you land on the name?
My sister came up with the name, Shayna Wenger. Yeah, she's a creative director. And she was like, she gave me a few options. She's like, where can I go for.com? And then she shortened it to like where4.com. And I was like, yes, that's it. So built it in spare time, like about 8 months. I was still working full-time as attorney, hired some coders in the Ukraine to code it. Again, because you don't have those skills. And something I've learned is that it's okay. You know, you don't need all the skills to build a product. In fact, you can't.
But to me, even finding coders is a complex undertaking under itself, right? Like to build something that requires creative engineering that's being driven by your mind, you have to essentially hire somebody that at a cost-effective way can realize this vision that you're essentially making up, right? That's what I find most remarkable of what you're able to do in that phase.
Thank you. You definitely you got to be agile, because you're not going to be great at hiring engineers and managing them at first. So we went through that team. I made a mistake, and then we got a better team. So you make mistakes, and you just have to recognize them early and pivot fast.
Yeah, and another thing that's kind of the theme of this episode for me is all of the different types of money that you can get along the way in the capital stages, because you really experienced a lot of different styles of capital through the whole journey. And Darren was the first one. It's really friends and family, close, rich uncle, homie. It's really like, can somebody just believe in me?
Yeah.
And he was that, right? Like that's where the dream starts, is it just takes one person. And then tell me, sort of what was the process that then led to me? How long was it until we met for the first time?
Pretty early on.
Yeah.
Probably a few months after the first prototype of where4.com, Darren was introduced to you, and we came into your fantasy factory, and
and to give you for that time frame, I really just wanted to start to explore all different types of industries and markets, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I had just launched the machine and gotten rid of every single one of the businesses I had. I got rid of 13 different businesses and only kept Street League and Super Jacket, my production company. And I really wanted to build out the portfolio. And this opportunity that was presented to me, of all places, through my Ferrari salesman, Beverly Hills Ferrari, my guy Amir, who also is the salesman for Darren, right? That's kind of like the connection. And, and then I had to meet at like, the L'Hermitage, like patio, full Beverly Hills style, like, for the iPad to be pulled up and like,
showing you the prototype.
Yeah. And even how like, it was funny because Amir, he's a hustler, and he showed it to me on his phone. Like, this is going to be so, you doing investing, you doing businesses, this is going to be so big. And he said it in the easiest, simplest way. He just said, the difference with this is you just put in the date you want to go and how much money you have, and it'll tell you where you can go. Instantly in my mind, it was this like adventure, right? It's like, oh my God, this is extraordinary, right? Like, so that was like one sentence hook for me, and once we sort of initially met and really began to talk about sort of the opportunity, it was really early stage, right? It was still like
I was still practicing law.
Yeah, you're practicing law.
Full caseload.
Right. Okay. So you had to go from that meeting to like do like a full like litigation.
Yeah. And that went on for a while. When we eventually pivoted to business and we went, we were discovered by that Fortune 10 company, I showed up to their headquarters, like seeming like I was a much bigger company. I was still practicing law.
That's it. Look, so before we even jump up to that, let's, because that's one of the more remarkable aspects of, the where4 to where2 journey. For me, it was like, I'm a brand guy. I love the potential of what this software and website could have been as this sort of millennial adventure tool, because like the most exciting thing about it and why I still believe in it so much as a consumer product is you just put in $500 and the 3 days you want to be gone, and it pops up a map of the world of all of the places that you can go for a flight and a hotel room, and it's like Bangkok for like $600 for 3 days. It's like, what?
Yeah, our first user was a secretary or personal assistant in the Bronx. She was like 21 years old. She never left the country, and she went to visit distant family in Chile.
Yeah. And you would have never known that you could go to Chile for the weekend for $400,
right.
Because up to that point, and really I'd say even to this day, like it's still about where do you want to go specifically, and then you just get all your options and then you pick your cheapest option is essentially how it's still done to this day.
Yeah, it's simple. The concept is very simple.
And look, I don't want to harp on it, but I'm going to say it again, it's still the most incredible consumer product ever. That is the adventure, like choose your own adventure, like, and then look, here's the beauty of its potential. And this is where, my brand mind was getting all fired up, and I'm trying to like, what about this? And I'm like, let's turn it into a verb. We got to make it like Google. And this idea that you just followed somebody that 3 days to Chile. Then, okay, that 3 days is up. You just put in another thing. Like you have 400 now. Now, where do you go? Like back then I was like, man, this is like its own travel show. Here's all this potential. Like, I mean, selling the dream of like what we could do to like turn this into a brand and get so much earned media and drive down customer acquisition costs. And oh my God, the beauty of the model is it's just reoccurring revenue because it's like every time somebody books again, you get paid off it. And it's just this perpetual thing. Once they begin to use it, then it's shareable between groups and then it just grows on itself. You don't even got to spend. I was all in on the consumer product.
Yeah.
And I would like to kind of hear the story. You had a super significant in that sort of time frame when we were trying to get the deal done, because I was all in. You went to South by Southwest and had this most insane like adventure of your own. That led to not only a deep amount of exposure, but also to a meeting that would change the trajectory of the business completely. Lay out that one weekend at South by Southwest.
Yeah. So we were, as always, like almost out of money. And we had one shot because I was invited to present on stage at South by Southwest, Wherefore, and the product had just gotten done, and we were in our last, $100,000 or so. And, I planned, this is going to be our moment. We're going to get a ton of earned media when I'm on stage presenting Wherefore, among another like 8 competitors at South by Southwest 2016. So I go there, I present my heart out. We got like 4th, 5th place, like nothing special, like they were.
Man, look, I was so in the story, I couldn't remember. I'm like, I think he won. And we got 4th place. I'm like, oh no.
Yeah, it was not the impact that I expected. And there was like 6 or 7 people that wanted to talk to us once I got off stage.
Hey, and let me say something.
Yeah.
The rebel Do-Or-Dier that will push all envelopes to make it happen is its spirit starting to shine here, because you knew like, hey, our initial seed capital is on the way. We don't know if Rob's gonna be in, right? Like you went and hustled your way to get into South by Southwest. Like you were constantly in that era of getting in front of all the right people, anyone that you could, to sell the dream and get exposure. Not waiting around hoping somebody would find out about you, which was another key to who you are and ultimately your success.
Totally. In fact, Darren was like maybe the 1,000th person that I had pitched Wherefore to. And then after that, it was every day, 20, 30 people for investors and for partnerships constantly. So I'm on stage South by Southwest. We didn't do as well as expected. A few people are waiting for me off stage, which is cool. Like they were mainly like investors interested in putting in some money. But what I really needed from it, which was this like initial splash of users, didn't happen. So my wife, who was a co-founder with me, and was like helped like manage our tech team. That's another answer to your question of how did I work, do this without tech experience, manage a software team. Well, she really stepped up.
Yeah.
So she's with me, and we open up the pamphlet and for the South by Southwest, and we see that there's a TechCrunch private party like an hour later after the event. And I told my wife, I was like, we got to go there. We got to get in. No matter what we do, we are getting in that, and we're going to find someone from TechCrunch, and we're going to get into the publication. So we go there.
And again, in for clarity, right? It's like, especially as it relates to raising capital in the technology space, like any coverage whatsoever in TechCrunch is going to open up an unprecedented amount of doors.
Totally. I mean, that was my goal. That was my singular goal from South by Southwest, was to get into TechCrunch. So we're in line waiting to get into the bar that they had bought out, and we just see like people trying to get in, being rejected, getting to the front. We're now like 2 or 3 people from the front. We're like, what are we going to do? My wife talked to the doorman, tries to convince him to let us in, and when I just sneak behind his back.
You got, man, it's the ultimate in classic bait and switch, because what is it? Skirt. what?
Yeah,
Like,
I mean, I had been practiced in that art.
and then did she follow you back in, or were you just like man alone in the?
Well, she was working at Deloitte, and Deloitte was like a co-sponsor, so she eventually did like find someone from Deloitte to let her in. So she got in like half an hour later. I'm still not convinced I would have gotten in though.
Yeah.
So my perfecting the art of sneaking into clubs from Poughkeepsie, New York, and age 16, 17 paid off as an entrepreneur.
Every skill you learn along the way can eventually help you someday.
So I'm in there, I tap a guy on the shoulder with a TechCrunch badge, and I'm like, I have this idea. I'd love to tell you about it. He like rolls his eyes, you know, and he's like, all right, fine, tell me about it. So I tell him about it, just like I told you, just like I told Darren. He's like, you're saying that doesn't exist? It's like, that's right. He whips out his laptop, takes me to the corner of the room, and just interviews me for 40 minutes. And the next morning, he texts me saying that he published the article. And within an hour, we had like 150,000 users on the site. And we had 1 million users by the end of the day, and broke our servers. You know, we had to call up the engineers like, more power, more power. Next day, it went from TechCrunch to Lifehacker, and Lifehacker went to BuzzFeed, and it ricocheted around the global media landscape. It was in CheckCrunch, you know, by the end of the week. It was on television in Tel Aviv.
Look, I love that there is a Czech crunch. That there's Czechoslovakian. Like, what is that? Like, is it Czech crunch? Like,
yeah, and I don't know because I couldn't read it. So
look, hey, that's also like, you know, again, that testament of, look, nobody's going to give it to you. You know what I mean? Like, fight for it, and that's the magic side. You know, he could have just said no, but the fact that it does happen and it drives the users for the first time, and now your business is moving, is the magic side of positioning yourself to get lucky, you know?
Yeah, I mean, you got to remember, people have done a lot harder things than whatever your startup is. So you can't take no for an answer. Whatever your idea is you're going to hit a roadblock, and that's what makes it valuable when you cross it. And you find a way around it because, again, we got to the moon. We've extended life by 60 years over the last 100 years. Like my wherefore was going to find a way around.
Yeah.
And I have that attitude towards every part of being an entrepreneur.
Okay, well, let's talk about the other major thing that came out of South by Southwest that really changed the trajectory of everything that you did. Tell that story.
So my next tech conference, I was running the circuit at that point, was New Orleans Collision Conference about 2 months later. And I got off stage and same thing, like this was the second time I got off stage to some crazy adventure. I got a phone call from an executive of a Fortune 10 company who at first I thought it was, you know, like a sales call. I almost hung up on her. And then she's like, you know, I used your site. I booked a trip to Switzerland from a diner with my kids in the background. And it only took like 5 minutes to book the whole thing. This is game changing. She's like, I don't know if you know anything about the business travel landscape, but you've leapfrogged what they're trying to do. So if we can license your technology for business travel, I'll make my client your first customer. And I think you're going to have a home run on your hands in the industry.
Yeah, and so what it meant was the consumer game was falling to the back, because now this Fortune 10 company, by just getting their business alone, you have this massive business overnight, right? And then when you think about the sales cycle on sort of the business enterprise side, it's like, wow, okay, I could be trying to get all these consumers and converting a few at a time versus like, if I start to get these massive companies, every single one is worth this giant amount of reoccurring revenue, which was like what was appealing and also made me sad.
Yeah.
Made me sad, right?
Yeah,
because
yeah.
like I knew that like, man, this is an unusual opportunity. It's really like left field for one of the biggest companies on earth to come in and say, hey, I think there's an opportunity to take what you created and apply it to us. And if it works for them, you know, everybody else is going to do it. So as sad as I was knowing that like my consumer adventure dreams were to be a part of this were slowly fading away, I knew that it was like a really, really, you know, sort of unprecedented and crazy opportunity for you. And I'd be, you know, curious to hear your thoughts on what sort of led to the transition, and how did you look at that opportunity? Did you know immediately, or did you have to kind of formulate it and put a plan to it to make it make sense for you, or did you really believe this is this incredibly lucky opportunity I should capitalize on?
What I knew is that it was very hard to convert the consumer traveler,
Yeah.
right? Because despite over 1 million users, we had like a dozen bookings, so we were starved of revenue. And that's because people are not loyal to travel brands. They're loyal to like a carrier, and a price, and they didn't know who Where4 was. So we'd teach them that they can go to Morocco this weekend, and then they'd go to Expedia to book it.
Yeah,
because there was nothing proprietary in our pricing. So I knew about that problem, and I had at that point some ideas on how to get around that, but I didn't need to, because this Fortune 10 company blew a hole and like just leapfrogged that problem as much as I could have ever imagined.
And let me say this about by this point I'm invested.
Yeah.
And I'm not, the best advisor at this stage, because that sort of conversion aspect and sort of that sort of problematic aspect of having somebody come see where they could possibly go, then go use it to go to a more trusted company without having that built in. I wouldn't have contemplated that, right? Like my experience would have just said, let's make a great brand and they'll all use it, right? Yeah. Like, no, they're going to use this great brand to go to Expedia, right? Yeah. To be inspired to go to Expedia. And I think that, again, that's where my blind spot as an investor advisor, as being kind of one of your early capital partners, was less of value. That became even more once you started to transition into the enterprise software. And then ultimately, as you built that out, you needed more capital, only you had this new story. And now you were reaching out for more strategic capital. Like, when were you really focused on how do I find the right capital now that I'm developing this product for this Fortune 10?
Well, I think to answer your first question about, how did I handle this pivot? Like, consumer, we're passionate and there's this opportunity. I really took it like step by step. I didn't have a master vision. Like I just went to their headquarters and came home with a contract, a multi-million-dollar a year contract, to pivot our technology. And then I tried to do it all. One of my biggest challenges as an entrepreneur is I tend to try to think we can do everything at once. I really need someone to say, no, you can only do that. And that was Brittany. That was the person that you brought in that showed me on a spreadsheet, you can't do both.
Yeah. And look, and I think from our perspective, one of the it was your experience led to just running and gunning, like hunting opportunity, getting and pushing, but that operating experience and then ultimately tying that to clear financials was that blind spot. And part of, at that stage, what we could offer was like, hey, this is a brilliant COO mind, CFO mind that can help you get clarity on the financials to understand the implications of the cash flow of how much runway you have to build this product and ultimately how to create value in the right amount of time.
So you brought in like smart operators that were generic, right? That could do anything. Like Brittany was literally like in the truck part business. Totally. So COGS. So that was great. We had that locked in. But the next thing we needed was a VC with credibility and connections in the space that we were entering.
Yeah, because up until that point, we were in our weeklies.
Yeah.
Bi-weeklies with just me, you, and Darren.
Yeah.
Right? And
those were fun days.
Oh, man. You know what's so funny about it is like we could just try to advise you, but there was no method to like how we couldn't tell you what to do. And like, we would just kind of be in one of the best, my most like remarkable moments ever is we had a bi-weekly meeting in this office in Beverly Hills. And then our following bi-weekly meeting, you had moved to Denver and the entire company to Denver. I never had a discussion, never heard it. And it's like, what? And like, because you had the program, you had found the entire team, everything was so much like more reasonable out there, everyone managing the entire product. But it was like, and it was the right thing to do at the time. But in your wild style, like, okay, this is the right move. This is what it was. That happened like in between a bi-weekly meeting, which is always something that was so funny to me.
Yeah, no doubt.
But look, at that point, you're now, hey, this is a different level. How do I find more strategic partners now that I have more credibility with this Fortune 10? And
right.
what
we were introduced to stage venture partners right when we were pivoting right in the early process. We weren't sure which direction we were going to go in, consumer or business, and they're a LA-based seed round enterprise investor. And, they were very intrigued by us having this multi-million-dollar contract and not even a product really, and the whole backstory. And they invested, they put in the first, like the next money after you. And they ended up being absolutely vital because when it came time for our A round, a few months later.
But before we even get to that, like, because that was a big change, right?
Yeah.
Like in that time, because it was also, that ended up being like a pretty significant, where if they came along, they were just part of that entire, I think it would be called the A round, right? Like where Jeff Fried came in.
No, that was the seed round.
Okay, so the seed round.
You were pre-seed.
Yeah, so if I was pre-seed, and then and me and Darren, if Darren was angel, I was pre-seed, then now here's sort of the seed round where the business has transitioned to enterprise software. Stage is this great, like smaller shop, but deeply connected in like Silicon Beach, and knows everybody, all the different levels of capital and strategic capital that could ultimately potentially help you. But in between then, and then Jeff Fried is more of a connector unto himself with relationships to strategics literally everywhere. Yeah. He's a really unusual, like almost like a family office representative type of investor, where he has access to a ton of high net worth investors, and then just a Rolodex almost that could go into any industry, right? He was a
super connector.
Yeah, he's a super connector, right? And so now it's transitioned to this entirely new feel, right? Because it's like it's not just me and Darren. It is now you got Jeff, and both the stage guys are on the board, and now the board meetings become real, right? So it goes from like, hey, it's kind of loosey-goosey, and Ryan's like running and gunning. What was it like to kind of make the transition to like, okay, I have to start formalizing this and answering to these guys? What was that transition like?
Hard.
Yeah. Oh man, it's so real. It's so real because you thrive in being able to have total freedom.
Yeah.
And when people who look, because you got to understand, for the most part, like it was my own capital, Darren's own capital. Now you got Jeff and Stage who are managing other people's capital.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of responsibility. They are on the front lines of co-signing this deployment of capital, outlining where they believe the opportunity and ultimately the return is. And so like their way of looking at it is much more, shall I say, militant. And it's really funny because it was this transition of like the struggle to feel comfortable, but almost like as equally for you as equally for the rest of the board. Me and Darren were used to it, and we would play the part of like, hey, this is let's just get him into some like rails here. I used to always tell you like, man, I'm just trying to, you're the racehorse, man, and right now you're just banging into the side of the rail. I'm just trying to build you a track that you can go full speed on. Right now you're just slamming into the rail.
Yeah, I remember that.
But talk about that transition, because that really was the evolution, almost like where you were forced to kind of evolve as a business person, a CEO, and really begin to grow.
I mean, I don't think I did anything like smart in that process. I kind of pushed through it.
Yeah.
Like that kind of experience, like managing personalities and hard personalities just takes trial and error, right? Or maybe other things that I didn't have. So I just kind of got the battle wounds and pushed through it. And then, a year later or so, like we had a different composition and we had emergence capital, whole different type of beast.
Yeah, and let's talk about that transition, right? And here's the beauty of someone like Stage. And this is one of the biggest things that I've learned from sort of the where for to where to journey is just the power of that growth, strategic growth capital being experts in the actual space that you're in, right? And because they have just sort of this much deeper breadth of knowledge, both from employees and standard practices and just sort of first in class ways of like creating value, and they even understand product and like tech stacks and these things that are super foreign to a lot of money, right? Mm-hmm. And I take it back to the value of Stage, right? Where they ultimately, their position as a smaller shop is, hey, we can get in early, then we can guide them to the perfect strategics, right? And so they immediately set out and got you, because I don't think it was just emergence. I think you really ended up meeting with a ton of different great strategics.
Yeah, they got me interviews with like a dozen great investors.
Yeah, and ultimately, emergence is focused in software as a service, right?
Yeah.
And which led to a ton of different opportunity. And I'd be curious as to like your first sort of meeting with them, and ultimately what made you feel like, hey, this is like the group that's really who I want to partner with to go to this next level.
I mean, mostly it was like getting into like your top school. They were the best. In what we wanted to do. So on top of that, they were just awesome people.
Yeah.
Like Joe Floyd, who got a seat on our board, Jason Green, they both took board seats. Like they led the deal and they were just incredible. Like they were really kind, and like their integrity really shined through above everything else. And, they deferred a lot, and they brought in the right people, and it was just a different experience. And it was just crystal clear that they were the right shop.
Yeah. And look, I think another thing that they really did is they put the CEO first.
Yeah.
It's a very unusual where
Totally.
In order to get that deal done, they asked for a ton of additional options in the option pool because of your inexperience and younger sort of learning cap raising and notes and sort of what happens in conversion and how you ultimately get diluted. You ended up getting significantly diluted, considering this is your baby that you created and you're the CEO. And what I thought was really thoughtful about how they approached the opportunity too was, even though they asked for a significant amount of what I would consider way above industry standard in the option pool, it was still done with this intent of making the business great, right? It's like not only give you a chance to get back way more equity, but also position the company to be able to bring on a super experienced operating CEO for you to take it to the next level, right? Which I just think that it lends itself to this deeper value than just money. Right there, this was all of these things that then had to be, we're also asking your existing board, all of us, that like, hey, we got it from here, right? And it was like,
and everyone did the right thing. Right?
Yeah,
they all had to get hard calls, being asked to step off the board.
Yeah, look,
when they each helped get us to where we are.
Yeah,
and everybody was like, okay, this is what's best for the company.
And it was because of how much we believed in emergence and like them co-signing this and putting that much capital in and we knew that, our money's good now. Right. And it's kind of like because it was and it put you in a tough position, right? Because you had a friendly board right, of a mixed group of characters, right? But it's still like your original co-founder, the serial entrepreneur skate homie, your two early stage venture guys, and Jeff Fried is like the super connector. It was a really manageable board versus like when they asked all of us to, hey, step away, let us essentially be a 3-person board where the two of us can basically help Ryan make decisions. And it made a ton of sense. It's like we all knew that like we were all over our skis at this point, you know what I mean? And even Stage that has, a ton of knowledge and deep experience in being around a ton of these enterprise businesses and software businesses as a whole still knew that, hey, it was their dream scenario to have this handed off to those guys. So, right. I'm curious what was that initial transition like? Was it kind of like a relief to where like you felt like now here's these group of guys that can speak the language and now we can build a plan together?
Yeah.
And when they were like, really wanting to put a CEO, because this is your baby now, and you've been the CEO the entire time. What was it like to go through that process? That's tough for a lot of guys and gals when it's their sort of thing, and now there's someone with that experience. But you really embraced that.
Yeah, it was another journey, another side, another branch of the journey. It was a lot easier because it was on my terms. Like it originally was prompted because we had to move to New York City. My wife got an awesome promotion at Fox that required that we move to New York. So I remember I called up Joe and I said, hey, we're moving to New York. This is one of those like in between board meetings.
Look, rebel Do-Or-Dier, man. He just did the giant A round. He's like, hey guys, not going to be able to be in the office every day. I'm headed to New York. It is another prime example of this man's wild style,
Exactly. So it's like, I don't know, maybe 8 months after the A round, we had to move to New York. So I planned on just coming every week to flying from New York to San Francisco, because we had now moved our office from Santa Monica to San Francisco to have a proper Silicon Valley company. So I planned on flying, and I called him up to tell him, no worries, I'm going to be making this flight every week. And he was like, that's a disaster. I've seen that happen before. It's not going to work. You're going to burn out after 4 months. And then I remember like there was this like pregnant pause where he was like, but I suppose we could tap one of our like expert executives in our network to be the CEO. And if you wanted to take a different role, and be more high level, we could do that. And you can move to New York and you could fly in, periodically. So I had no idea how to take that. I took a month to think about it. And, what I actually said is like, I'm happy to meet anybody.
Yeah.
So they put me in front of a handful of people and I got to know them, and I met Chris Ye, who just seemed like the right guy. And I just, again, slowly slowly accepting that it was a better thing for everybody. And what helped me personally realize that is that I had done a 360 management review for my, at this time, maybe 8 employees.
Yeah.
And just to see how I was doing and get feedback. And it wasn't pretty.
Wow.
Good
for you though, man. You have the self-awareness to even take that time and energy and be willing to take that. It's also
called self-interest.
Yeah, that's true. I guess it's true. But and what was the worst takeaway in your mind from it?
Well, it was just all the things you don't want to do as a manager is what people were saying that I was doing. Micromanaging, being inconsistent, just kind of flying by the seat of my pants. I guess no surprise to you.
Man, the rebel Do-Or-Dier.
Yeah. So, and I combined that with this awesome guy who had been head of product at Box and helped it go public. And he had a illustrious career before that. He had all the right pedigree. It's like, this is it. This is the right move. And he was very cool. He wanted to work with me as he wants me to stick around. I wasn't planning on riding out into the sunset, and there was no indication from anybody, not Emergence and not from Chris, that was what everyone was trying to do. So with all that, tied together in a little pretty bow, I was like, this is the right move. And I did it. And I became president and Chris became CEO.
And then ultimately Chris, along with Emergence, carved the path to the acquisition, right? And kind of run me through what that experience was and ultimately how that went down and really what it felt like to kind of put an ending, if you will, on this entire journey with that acquisition.
Well, we opened up 2020, with some amazing opportunities with some other huge companies to really start to take off. And then, then COVID happened and our revenue plummeted 95% in 1 week. Like I had just come back from my wedding and this is March 8th was our wedding. And then like March 10th, our main customer stopped traveling and everything goes to shit.
Yeah, because really it's enterprise software in the height of the pandemic when nobody's flying anymore.
The only worst hit industry, I think, are restaurants, bars, clubs. So it was an existential problem for us. And we either had the choice of hibernating through it and like, firing 80% of our company and just hoping that we're still there at the end a year or two later, or doing an acquisition. There was, during turmoil, there's also a lot of opportunity. So there was a lot of big companies that were interested in acquiring us in like a distressed sale. Yeah. And again, that was another one of those, incredibly hard times where like for weeks I didn't sleep just thinking about the right move, because each one has its winners and losers, right? Like each of those outcomes were like better for some people than others. And, I'm the only person in the company that really was there from the whole time. So I was the only one that knew everybody and was like trying to find a way of like moving the blanket that's too small for a bed to cover the most people. Yeah. And we got a couple term sheets and, I ran my own process. Chris and I kind of independently like sought companies to do the acquisition, just to have the best array of options. And Flight Center had the best terms and promised the best treatment of our employees. And most importantly, promised to let us keep everybody in the company. Yeah. Every person. So, and this is at a time when, the people are losing their jobs left and right in the travel industry. So, and, we were able to get a decent financial outcome for our investors, given the situation that we're in. Yeah. So I took that as a win.
Yeah, and look, to me, it's an extraordinary win. I think it's the idea that you got to go through, having zero experience and just trying to solve a problem for yourself and just being this relentless, like anything, pushing every single envelope, every single door, right opportunities, literally making your own luck every step of the way. All the way to the acquisition, and to me, it's an extraordinary win, and it was something that I was very thankful to be a part of, right? Because it just shows like what one person's will can make happen, right? And that is that do-or-dier mentality and that just willingness to keep pushing. And never give up till the very end, So, I'm honored to be able to give you this extraordinary championship trophy, these amazing liquidity vintages. And look, and another thing that I've been doing is, I built the Do-Or-Dier Entrepreneur Foundation. It's this foundation is really about giving people an opportunity to pitch their business plans that don't have access to capital, that come from underserved communities, and that we can grant them the money, and this foundation is for the people that have your type of spirit, that ultimately like will go so hard to and unlock every possibility to make something a reality. So I'm putting 100,000 into the foundation on behalf of WhereTo. So I just want to tell you that.
Thank you.
And
that's awesome.
Just want to tell you again, like I I learned one of the most valuable lessons when you want to play the game of venture. Look at these stages and know that even the smallest check at the seed round with the right strategic can help guide you to the ultimate strategic investor at an A round or a growth round that's going to ultimately be the cornerstone of your business surviving and or thriving. And that's, worth its weight in gold, both through this process and ultimately as I continue to build companies down here at the Dyrdek machine.
There's going to be some great ones down the line for you. I know that.
All right, well, look, man, it's been a real pleasure. Enjoy the wine, enjoy the trophy, and again, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you. I have one slight correction to make, which is that it's so far from being just me that led it forward. Like I also want to thank my team that's still there. Yeah. Wilbur, Kevin, David, they were there from day one pretty much, and they're still there, like leading the charge, and their passion and their commitment is why we're here. And all the people that report to them, like our team is like, you haven't met them, but they're like every bit as deserving of this as I am. And I'll find a way to share some. And I'm starting a blog for some periodic ideas I have and articles. So it's ryanwenger.com.
There it is.
And find me on Twitter at Wangstar1.
Look, find the Wangstar and get into this man's rebel lifestyle. Ryan, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rob.
If you think you have what it takes to be a do-or-dier and partner with me and build an amazing company, or if you want to join our growing community of machinists to be the first to test our new products and help us manufacture amazing, go to DyrdekMachine.com. If you haven't listened to the Dyrdek Machine Primer, I encourage you to go back to episode 1, which gives you insight into our machine method to really enhance your experience for the rest of the episodes. Make sure to subscribe to Build with Rob wherever you join us: YouTube, Spotify, Apple, and anywhere else you get your podcasts and videos. And most importantly, you gotta put your eyes on the prize. You gotta build a plan to see that it's even possible. And then you have got to take all the action in the world to make your dreams come true. See it, believe it, do it. We'll see you next time on Build with Rob.